Hey guys, and welcome back to my Tales Against Humanity YouTube channel. I'm going to start posting human read stories of my most popular videos as well as regular videos later in the day. Once this first story gets over 150 likes, I shall post a second story. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel as it really helps me. The Missing Phone Line, with special guest appearance by a server rack of exactly the expected height. Native English speaker, writing on tablets, the formatting should be mostly okay, but there's always at least one typo. TLDR, incompetent IT manager tells FWIT of the year award level lie. IT manager gets caught out by the next time someone walks around with their eyes open. Actual situation and turns out to be beyond all reasonable comprehension. Trigger warning. My last Reddit post dealt mainly with some people who were mind-numbingly dishonest and of whom I had a surprisingly poor opinion. This post will cover some of the same territory, but also venture into the more controversial topics of folks who are A. bullies, B. eye-wateringly inept, C. some combination of A, B, or D. attempting to cover up any of the above by feigning the lesser ills of ignorance and laziness. If you don't want to know what I think of such people, look away now. Additional trigger warning. This is a long post. That's partly because I feel it's the best way to convey the essential nuance of the story, but also because I had to go through this S word in real time, and you lot don't deserve much better. Introducing characters as they appear seemed to work okay last time, so I'll do it that way again. Buckle up. Many years back, I worked for XYZ Inc. They made specialist and expensive production machines for a particular type of industry. This story takes place a few years after the start of my last post, and XYZ Inc.'s biggest job in hand was fitting out a new manufacturing plant for a particular customer. We'll call them ABC Corp. To give a flavour of the scope here, just phase one of this factory took 18 months of work after the order was placed, and XYZ Inc.'s direct billing ran well into 8 figures. And we also specified for ABC to buy a similar value of other manufacturers' machinery so that it could work directly with ours. There was over $500,000 in conveyor belts alone. You might think that meant we were in charge of the whole thing, but we weren't. ABC Corp wanted to keep control and economize by using their own people where possible. So they ran it themselves, and as well as being the customer, they acted as project managers and liaison between the architects, builders, machinery and plant suppliers, fitting trades, etc., etc. Not a problem as far as we at XYZ Inc. were concerned. We sold the job to a specification, we wrote the contract to define that specification, and we will have no problem delivering on all the promises made therein, exactly as promised. Oh, but if you want to change that specification after the fact, there'll be a bill for doing it. As far as we're concerned, feature creep means Uncle Fester. And if I were working away and then unexpectedly find that whatever it is of yours we need to connect to, incorporate, or work around isn't ready on schedule, isn't to spec, or is some new and exciting spec we didn't agree to progress, will stop, and you'll get an even bigger bill. And the definition of yours is anything we don't supply because you're managing this S show, not us. Did I mention the project manager? ABC Corp's pickup for this role was the talent they'd already recruited to be plant manager at the new factory when this place started running. Makes sense, you'd think. Who else could possibly be more motivated to make their own life easier by delivering the best built, most efficient new factory imaginable? And having done that, who would then also be an in-house expert on every part of the facility, able to troubleshoot production issues as soon as they came up? Well, I don't know what guidance ABC Corp had given the recruitment agent into this kind of person they wanted, but it must have made fascinating reading. In the collective opinion of XYZ Inc.'s people on the ground, the individual selected for this prestigious role had precisely 2 skills: 1, shouting, and 2, lying. And frankly, they weren't much good at the second one. But I digress. Part of this job was a factory data collection and analysis system. All the machines in the building had at least some level of onboard intelligence, and every single one was going to have an Ethernet connection to a data collection server. That server would monitor what happened throughout the factory second by step and then produce a range of standard and custom reports. Not a cheap option to add on a factory of this size, but numbers never lie. So if you've got a good people looking at those numbers, any system like this that never misses the detail can be an amazing tool to keep that place running efficiently and spot future issues while they're still small. F knows what ABC Corp thought Project Manager was going to do with it. Part of the deal with this thing was that XYZ Inc. also got to see the data. That way we can learn from it and incorporate those lessons in our next generations of machines to make them better. And if ABC Corp felt they had some complaint about our product, the data system was there to tell the whole unvarnished story as to whether they were right or wrong. To do this, XYZ Inc. supplied data server rack that the Ethernet lines are all connected to, also needed an ISDN line. If you've not heard of an ISDN before, no worries, it's basically a dedicated phone line optimized for data. There's plenty more nerd speak in the detail, obviously, but that's all we need for story purposes. You'll remember XYZ Inc. weren't in charge of the entire project, and the ISDN line counted as being part of the building, so it's something that ABC Corp had to arrange themselves. And like everything else, it has a specification and location in the Phase 1 server room where we'd been told to install the data server rack and a due date. Sorry, I gotta go back and whine about ABC's Corp's personal again. I've already told you about their new plant management hire. Obviously, in that case, ABC Corp was seeking someone really special to bring the new factory online with a bang. I know they succeeded. I heard the FUD from here, and they had the budget to match. Unfortunately, they hadn't been able to be quite so picky in the hiring management at their existing local plant. Oh, and the place was also a hotbed for nepotism. Working from home without leave was also rife. So some of the existing employees, in particular those who seemed destined to spend the rest of their eternity in lower or middle management, were just awe-inspiring to their apparent inability to do any work more challenging than holding down the floor. IT was run by one such an individual, who also had a truly jaw-dropping lack of self-awareness. Department second in command was pretty much a carbon copy and was the one other tech I personally dealt with. If there was a qualification test and all to work there, I can only assume its main feature was the ability to recognize a PC without being prompted, extra points, and earmarked for fast track promotion if you knew that a laptop is better. Of course, it's unfair to characterize the capabilities of an entire department. There are about 6 or 7 IT folks in total, based on just the head honcho, deputy, and chief tech. I only visited the actual IT office a couple of times. I'm not sure they were all sentiments at all at the time, so maybe just to draw a veil over it and hope for the best. Anyway, ABC Corp's occasional present local IT manager, henceforth known as a F-wit about town, as well as being somebody's offspring, was put in charge of all IT infrastructure, etc., at the new factory. And if all goes well, they're lined up for the cushy job of the heading the IT department at the shiny new place. On the subject of things going well, so many things have already been totally effed up that About Town has by now been given specific written instructions to check every single thing personally. So arranging the ISDN line is their job. One of my many, many jobs is to chase them up on it repeatedly. We're about a year into the project by this stage, so I know what I'm facing. I've simply scheduled myself to call FWIT About Town every Tuesday and Thursday to check the current status of each individual item on the ever-growing laundry list of IT failure, take notes for the project documentation and my colleagues, and pass details of anything new that is wrong/overdue, or even more spectacularly wrong and overdue than last time, onto those responsible for billing ABC Corp. About 2 weeks after the due date for the ISDN line, I'm told it's done. I can tick it off my list. I will admit to being quite surprised. About a week later, I even got a phone number for it. I passed this startling but welcome news on to XYZ Inc., subsidiary building the data server rack. I'll call them XYZ Data from now on, and those doubting Thomases asked me to check if it's really true. They even want me to plug something in at ABC Corp end so they can test the data capabilities of their new toy. How could anyone be so untrusting? As it happens, I wasn't planning to be on site for a couple of weeks. I still had other work apart from this project. So I called in a favor and asked one of the XYZ Inc. techs commissioning some of our other gear to take a few minutes and go up to the Phase 1 server room and do the necessary for our offsite guys at XYZ Data. I pass on the nice clear instruction I've been given. The ISDN socket is on the waist height trunking in the server room, right where the XYZ Inc. rack is supposed to go, and is labelled with both its function and the phone number, and leave the tech to organise with the XYZ Data what time/day best suits them both. A couple of days later, I get a call from our tech to tell me that this test was a bust. They couldn't find the ISDN socket in the advertised location or anywhere else. It's not even a big room, and as yet had basically no equipment in it. I thank our tech for their wasted lunch break and call Effort about town and explain the apparent absence of the ISDN line and the time we've lost by our inability to check its functionality with surpassing patience. Effort about town assures me that the line is in, tested, and they have done this personally. I express minor reservations as to the strict accuracy of these assertions. After some discussion, I persuade the esteemed head of ABC Corp's IT department to meet with our tech at the server room, so he can personally show an XYZ Inc. staff member where the blasted thing is. A week goes by, and the F-wit about town has mysteriously blown off 2 meetings with XYZ Inc. tech. A couple of days later, I ring ABC Corp IT department. Hi, F-wit about town. Just a courtesy call to remind you that you were due to meet with our commissioning tech in the new factory server room 5 minutes ago. Yeah, they cancelled on me. Some urgent problem with one of your machines. Really? They're standing in the server room waiting for you now. You sure? I'm standing next to them. We'll see you in 10 minutes. About 15 minutes later, there was a cross-town drive involved. Effort about town arrives to join XYZ Inc. Tech and I. A brief discussion and some pointing at walls ensues, but the ISDN connection remains frustratingly absent. Then, and only then, Effort about town plays their get out of jail free card. They have an invoice from a phone company no less, and on this invoice are charges for the installation of an ISDN line at the new factory, billed to ABC Corp, and signed for by Effort about town. There is the minor detail that their order was placed after they were told me the thing was already done and tested, but fair's fair, a solid 2 out of 10 for effort. The XYZ Inc. tech and I exchanged a silent glance and agreed that the receipt is likely genuine, forging such a thing not being in about town's known skill set. Motive and opportunity are definitely there, but means is lacking and probably always will be. About town then reasonably explains that having paid the invoice, they didn't bother to check their work in any way, and just said that they had because it was obviously all going to be fine. The tension leaves their body and they bask in the satisfaction of job well done. It's now my turn to explain a few things, not least of which is that, despite Effort about town having ordered the thing on ABC Corp's account, there isn't a trace of it whatsoever. About town has literally nothing to show for having spent their employers' money. The server rack will still therefore need a connection to what I'm now referring to as the real world, that place on the other side of the factory fence, ideally using a telecoms line of the contractually specified type. It was at about this point that the XYZ Inc.'s commissioning tech decided they need to go outside for some fresh air. About a week of non-progress later, I am summoned to project manager's office to explain the build that had resulted from these shenanigans, and the upshot of that conversation was that as far as the ISDN line was concerned, I was to fix it, so that XYZ Data were happy and ABC Corp weren't in breach of contract. Effort about town was relieved on this particular responsibility, and I was given authority to do the job with ABC Corp's money. Lucky me. Well, I had an invoice for work allegedly done. I had a phone number, and if you tried connecting to that number using suitable hardware, it seemed as though it was a real line, but with no hardwire on the other end. So I rang the phone company's tech support, explaining the situation and my newfound authority. An appointment was duly arranged for a phone company technicians to come on site and investigate. A couple of days later, I got a phone call from the technician who'd been allocated a job. Personal service. I like that. They were cancelling the appointment, and it was a courtesy call to let me know. Why? I asked. So you don't waste time waiting for me when I'm not coming. No, why are you cancelling the appointment? Phone company tech then explained that they'd prepared for the visit in advance by testing the line, all okay, and looking up its specs. And from the exchange boxes it was listed as being routed from, they could tell there was no way it could be connected to the building they were meeting me in, not even the same part of town. So I explained that I was holding paperwork which indicated quite clearly that ABC Corp had paid for the connection to be in that very building, and that they even had a receipt saying it now was. Phone company tech generously agreed that this was something of an issue, so instead of just closing the ticket, they referred it inwards and upwards to some higher level phone company tech department and gave me the relevant numbers and contact details. It took a couple more days to get the whole story. Apparently, the phone tech assigned the installation job had been unable to find the new factory site for some reason. I don't know why. They had the address. The other phone lines had been installed on the same site by the same company. Multiple delivery trucks from half a dozen vendors had come directly to site without difficulty after journeys of up to 1,000 miles. I mean, it was the biggest construction site in town. The main building was the size of a football pitch. I don't know, maybe they just weren't from this planet. Anyway, having failed to find a job site, they did what any reasonable person would do in the circumstances. Chose a random phone exchange box somewhere in the local area and ran an ISDN line from that into a convenient nearby building. Tick off the job as complete and move on to the next one. Actually, I'm pretty damn sure they weren't from this planet. Phone company Supertex were at least as dumbfounded by this as I was. Let me say that again just in case it didn't sink in. Phone company took ABC Corp's order for an additional telecoms facility and their money. And in response, phone company staff's members broke into someone else's building in a different part of town and installed a phone line without the owner's consent. I have to this day a mental picture of a British copper collaring a criminal with the immortal line, I'm arresting you on suspicion of installing a phone line without consent. You do not have to say anything, but anything you do say may be taken down and used in evidence against you. If you'll just step this way, it just won't go away. It's still there when I shut my eyes. So we discussed ABC Corp's options. What I wanted was the line disconnected from wherever it was and reconnected in the server room at ABC Corp's new factory. Don't care if it's the same number or gets a new one. Sadly, that wasn't an option. At least disconnection wasn't. That needed additional permissions. But ABC Corp are paying for the line and they've given me authority on this. I can fax that through again. Yeah, we accept that, but it's not in their building and we need the building owner's consent to remove a data line. Which building is it? Where? The line isn't supposed to be there anyway. Surely we can just tell them. Oh, we can't tell you where the connection is if it's not on ABC Corp's site. That'd be a breach of customer confidentiality. Do they know they have an ISDN line? Probably not. So tell them about it and ask for permission to remove it. Oh no, we can't do that. It's against phone company policy to recommend that a company disconnects a billable service. But the service is unused and the bills for it go to ABC Corp, who are prepared to pay for an ISDN line going to the right place that they can actually use. Rules are rules. We aren't allowed to do that, and we can't tell you where the line is connected either. In the end, I bowed to the inevitable and ordered a new ISDN line for the new factory using ABC Corp's money. I also recommended that they stop paying bills on the original one and demand a refund on the installation. But I've no idea if anyone ever took notice of that. Did this particular debacle affect effort about town's chance of getting that cushy new job? Probably not. They were likely still seen as the best of the available internal candidates, and all they'd ever done here was claim to have personally tested something that didn't actually exist. Barely worth mentioning in the wacky world of ABC Corp. The end. You thought I'd forgotten that special appearance by the server rack, didn't you? A couple of weeks later, the data server rack arrived from XYZ Data. The new factory was laid out like a lot of big modern plants. Production machines in great cavernous halls with plenty of room to swing a forklift, a 3-story office block tucked away on one side for the ancillary departments and production offices, and the like spread around the machinery halls as near possible to what they controlled. So the server room was on a mezzanine floor attached to the wall between material processing and phase 1 production. At this point, I need to introduce Site Manager. Because of the way this place was being built in phases with facilities and machinery being installed as soon as their part of the building was done, ABC Corp had to contract an OHS specialist to control the site for them. Site Manager had no interest in whether the factory worked to spec or even ever produced anything at all. Their job was to make sure that the commissioning techs weren't run over by a forklift driver who'd just been blinded by someone welding steelwork or similar. And when phase 1 started operations, to make sure that those were kept separate from construction, installation, and commissioning of phases 2 and 3. If you wanted to do something, anything on site, you needed Site Manager say so. If whatever it was your speciality or had been done before, then it was simply a question making sure you had clear space to work in, kind of like air traffic keeping planes apart in the sky. If you want to do something new, Site Manager will be checking your plan versus OHS rules to make sure they're happy. Site Manager's word on this is final. Site Manager was great to deal with and knew their stuff, and they were insured up to the hilt. So I drop a line to Site Manager saying this thing has arrived, where to find it, and could they have a forklift put up on the mezzanine, please? No hurry, anytime this week will be fine. Thanks. A couple of days later, I get an email back saying the server rack is now on the right floor, but Site Manager can see a potential problem. They'll be happy to show me the cause of their concern next time I'm on site. So I thank them again and arrange to meet. Standing next to the server rack on the mezzanine landing outside the server room. The problem is obvious. The rack won't go through the server room door. It's too tall. The rack is a standard 19-inch job. They do come in various heights, but this one is what we'd been expecting, just under 2 meters, 6 foot, and a couple of inches. I don't remember the exact number. Close inspection onto the door, on the other hand, shows that it's quite a bit shorter than normal. Most people can walk through it without stopping, but not at all. There's no apparent reason for this. The ceiling on both sides of the wall is a good 12 feet, say 4 meters up. It smells distinctly like a project manager special. So I give XYZ Data a call. Once I've persuaded them that it isn't April Fool's, they agree that it'll be okay to tip the server rack over on its back, roll it through the door on a trolley, and stand it up again. Just check all the screws and connections look solid before doing it. Unfortunately, Site Manager doesn't like this. We can maybe use the forklift to put the thing back down at ground level, lie it down there, and then lift it back up to the mezzanine again. But once it's through the doorway, there's no way the forklift or any other mechanical handling gear can reach it in there to stand it up again, and it weighs too much for Site Manager to allow 1 or even 2 people to try do it by hand. Either way, the doorway has to change. The server be put somewhere else, not happening. Or we're gonna have to put some mechanical handling gear up on the mezzanine to do the job. And that equipment not only has to be able to be lifted up there by the forklift, it also has to be able to fit through the problem doorway. There isn't anything suitable currently in use on site, so it'll need to be hired in specially. And when the equipment hire company were told that the first thing we planned going to do with their kit was load it on a forklift and put it on the mezzanine that presently lacked guardrails, they immediately added extra insurance. Combined total is just into 4 figures to move a server rack through a doorway into the room it was designed for. Time to present project manager with the options. Rebuilding the doorway so that standard issue server racks and moderately tall people can get in and out of the server room without being scalped strikes both site manager and I as best, but it's not our decision. Now, before you ask, it had been suggested that the pre-wired and fully tested rack could be disassembled, carried through the doorway in pieces and put back together again, but the XYZ Data weren't very pro anymore, even from another subsidiary messing with the hardware they'd supplied, and our commissioning techs on site weren't exactly short on their own work to do either. Also, ABC Corp didn't want to pay the bill for the extra labour to actually do this. Then, project manager announced that ABC Corp's IT department would do this disassembly/reassembly at only modest cost to XYZ Inc. I think it was while I was declining this kind offer that the XYZ Inc.'s tech, the same one who'd previously looked up for the ISDN line with me, experienced straight-face retention issues and had to leave the building for further supplies of fresh air. Cue a rant from project manager about how ridiculous it was that they were constantly being forced to change their project decisions by XYZ Inc. And when we weren't doing that, we handing out bills for stuff of theirs we were changing for them. Didn't us peasants understand that project manager was in charge? With hindsight, I think I'll now have to admit that is just possible that why not try getting something right for an effing change was maybe not the most helpful thing to say at this point. Whatever. It was duly decreed from on high project manager that the doorway would not change temporarily or otherwise, and the server rack would just have to get in the room somehow. Well, the contract says the data server should be in a nice air-conditioned server room, so does common sense. And if a door can't be made to fit, we'll have to go with site manager's plan. I give them a heads up. No problem, says site manager and agrees to make preliminary arrangements. Obviously, to confirm the bookings, they'll need to know who's picking up the tab for this. Will it be XYZ Inc.? No. We wrote the contract, remember, and the data collection system has its own section in there. By a curious coincidence, in addition to saying what it does and the connections and power feeds it needs, that section just happens to define the size and weight of the equipment XYZ data would be supplying, and the minimum height and width of the path required to get it in from the loading dock to the server room. Path to be kept clear for the lifetime of the factory, just in case XYZ Inc. need to swap the rack for another one sometime down the line. We liked wiring stuff down, we were good at that. What do you want? Just a bit of paperwork. Project manager. This is a change note for ABC Corp to confirm the alteration to contract spec with the smaller server room door. Sign here. Scratchy pen noises. And this is the purchase order instructing site manager to hire in equipment and people to move the XYZ data rack through the revised door horizontally and then stand it up again in compliance with OHS at ABC Corp's expense. Sign here and here. Kicker. The forklift and other equipment doing the job was going to wind up in just about everybody's way for a couple of hours, as well as not being available for other work. So the move was scheduled to actually happen late one Friday night when most crews were long gone. Now, I'm not insinuating anything, but the rack could actually have been tipped over and carried through the door fairly easily by, say, 4 or 5 people, even if OHS didn't like it. And 1,000 split 4 ways is more than decent beer money for the rest of the weekend. Kicker 2. Guess what size ABC Corp had chosen for their own server racks? Guys, drop a comment in the box below what you would have done with the ISD line, and what would you have done with the server rack trying to get it through the door? How would you have handled it? What about the OP? Do you think he controlled himself in the right manner? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget, we need to get 150 likes, and then I will drop a new human read voice story of one of the most popular stories we have put on the channel. We'll see you soon. Bye now.